Welcome to the channel. In this video, we are going to try to get this plane up and running. This is a user-made plane that I picked up from the Browns tool auction. We don't really have any information on it other than it is user-made. But what attracted me to it, other than the cool styles and shape that it has, is the fact that it is a narrow plane. So if you follow the channel, you know that my go-to plane for edge jointing is a Miller's Falls number 11, which is a 5 1/4 size. And the reason I like it is because it's narrow and it's easier for me to keep on the edge of a board. The issue with it, though, for edge jointing is that it's short. So this plane is just a little bit longer, and I'm hoping that I can turn this plane into a user so it can take over for my edge jointing needs. So let's dive in. Getting this plane up and running was a lot of fun, but I do have to tell you guys that the plane has a major error that I believe eliminates a possibility from being a user plane for me. So I'll talk about that later, but we do get this plane up and running. We do get it to take shavings, and it was still a lot of fun. So the first place I started was the iron, of course, flattening the back of the iron, because every time you get these vintage irons, they have a back bevel on them, or they're not flattened or whatever. So I use my mag switch, which is something that I highly recommend if you tend to flatten the backs of irons a lot, because it gives you more to hold on to. It also just makes sure you have even pressure across the iron. If you don't know what mag switch is, it's basically a magnet that you can turn on and off. I will say, though, I do not recommend mag switches for chisels, because chisels are narrower, and when you add a mag switch on top of that, you're adding more height, which increases the chance that you're going to roll over the sides of your chisel by rocking it while you're trying to sharpen. So I would say just use them for plain irons, and then honestly, they're just awesome to have around the shop. I always find different applications for them. So I got the back of the iron good enough. The back bevel is still there and the sides aren't perfect, but it's good enough for now. I switched my focus over to the bevel of the plain iron, which was rounded, so the opposite of a hollow grind. If you see a hollow grind on an iron, it means they use some sort of round wheel or a bench grinder type thing. If it's flat, they pretty much used a jig or a work sharp or something like that. If you see that the bevel is rounded, that means that whoever had that iron before freehand sharpened that iron, meaning they probably rocked it a little bit as they were sharpening, creating that rounded. It does not really affect the cutting edge of that plane at all. The only thing you have to pay attention to is just to make sure that that iron stays square. Or that it is square, I guess. Now, with this particular iron, the sides of the iron weren't parallel. I don't even know how to explain it, but they were off. So no matter which side I measured from, it was showing that one side was high, and then you'd go to the other side, and it would be the other side that was high. So I wasn't able to check for squareness of this iron, but I got it good enough, eyeballed it. While I was working on the bevel, I would actually putz around and do other things. So when the iron got too hot for me to hold on to, I would, I don't know, grab a plane and flatten the bottom of it, or grab some chisels and flatten the back of those, just so I can work on other things and multitask while I'm working on this. So after a lot of time, the iron still wasn't perfect. I'm still running into issues with that back bevel and just those different things, but I got it good enough to where it was shaving hairs. So I switched over to the bottom of the plane. It only took a few swipes and I got the bottom of the plane flat and decided, hey, let's try to take some shavings. And nope, I ran into another issue. No matter how much I adjusted the iron, it was always heavy on one side. Now, I know that I couldn't check for squareness of my iron, but it was square enough, and we flattened the bottom of the plane, so that's leading me to believe that the iron bed, or the frog of this plane, is not parallel to the sole, or it's not flat. So what I did is I took some files, took some chisels, took some rasps to work on flattening the bed of this, and you can see where it's high. It's high in the middle. The one side where it was heavy was actually really dipped out, so it took quite a bit of work to flatten this frog out. And after a lot of work, I then noticed a knot. A knot in the plane. Specifically, well, there's actually two knots, but one big knot right on the bed of the plane. And I am not sure why whoever made this plane would orient the wood to where there is a knot on the frog or a knot on the bed. It does not make any sense to me. But that right there is pretty much going to eliminate it as a user, because the wood is constantly going to move around that knot. So even though I'm doing all of this work to flatten the frog bed and get everything, the bottom flat and all this kind of stuff, it's just going to move again. That's the nature of wood. So it is what it is. I kept working on it. I put it back together and I was able to take some shavings with it, but then I noticed another problem. the chip breaker was getting shavings underneath it and the mouth was too small. So I took it all apart. I worked on the chip breaker a little bit, but the chip breaker is actually bent. So no matter what I really did, it was still going to be high on that side, so I adjusted it enough, and again, it's good enough because I already recognize that this plane is not going to be a user. While I had the iron out, I also did the David Charlesworth ruler trick. A lot of people like to say it's the Rob Cosman ruler trick. It's not. David Charlesworth came out with it first. That's where you put a thin ruler on one side of your stone and you lap the back of your iron to create that slight back bevel. If I find vintage irons that have back bevels, sometimes I will do that David Charlesworth ruler trick just to hone it up. And I know eventually after some grinding, I'll get rid of that back bevel. But anyway, so I got it really sharp now to where it was really shaving hairs. Chip breaker was, again, semi-okay, but I put everything back together and it worked really well. It was taking some really nice shavings and one really cool shaving. Check this out. Never in my life have I had this happen. The shaving's not too thick either. I also did test it on the edge of a board, and it was taking some really, really nice shavings. They were coming out even. They were coming out parallel. The edge of my board was square. It was leaving a beautiful surface. It was awesome. So I am a little bit disappointed that this plane most likely won't be able to be a user. Alright, so I'm still going to say that this is mission accomplished because we did get this plane to take shavings. Unfortunately, though, I don't think I'm going to be able to have it as a user because of that knot that is directly in the bed of this plane. The wood's just going to keep moving around, and I feel like I'm going to have to constantly fiddle with it, file the bed more, move things around, and I just don't want to have to do that as my user. But what I am going to do is, right now it's winter, so I'm going to leave this set up, set it aside, and in the summertime bring it back out and see how much things have moved around just because I'm curious. But I have decided after getting this up and running and trying it out that I do want to emulate or copy this plane and make my own. I'm going to change this knob around because I don't like these points on this side. They dig into your hand. But everything else about it I really like. I like the weight. I like the length. I like the width. This tote's really cool, so maybe I'll try to do some carving on it as well. So I think that's going to be a fun project. Keep an eye out for that. And then if I remember, I will do a follow-up video in the summer of how things moved around with the knot on this plane. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you got any questions, any comments, anything like that, feel free to let us know down below, and have a good day.